We're talking about Down syndrome, Chapter 1. Vitae World Homeschool Concept Advanced Program for Kids and Parents. Hello, my name is Eldina Raščić. Today I'm going to talk about Down syndrome. This is the first chapter. Welcome. A baby born with Down syndrome can be quickly identified because the signs are well known to doctors. First, most babies with the condition have reduced muscle tone compared with typical infants. This results in a degree of floppiness present at birth. The medical name for this sign is hypotonia. Babies with Down syndrome have eyes that are noticeably slanted both upwards and outwards. The baby's mouth and tongue may differ in shape and size compared to those without the condition. Some babies are diagnosed prior to birth. In the next module, you will learn about prenatal testing and genetic counseling, including ethical and moral issues around the practices. Typically, babies with Down syndrome will have a smaller than average mouth and their tongue may protrude behind the lips. The back of the head is usually flatter than average and birth weight and length is awfully low. Newborn babies with Down syndrome are often shorter and lighter than average. Their noses may be small and their nasal bridge flat. Finally, their palms may only have one crease, as opposed to the usual 3 seen on most people's hands. The palm will often be small and the fingers shorter than average. The gap between their big toes and second toes is often larger than average. This is sometimes referred to as a sandal gap. It is important to note that although the individuals with this syndrome share a common range of physical characteristics, they do not all look the same. Just as a typical child usually resembles other members of their family, so too will a person with Down syndrome. They will more closely resemble their relatives than others with the same diagnosis. Every child diagnosed with Down syndrome will show signs of delayed development and learning disability. However, individuals are affected to various degrees and it is impossible to predict in advance how severe this impairment will be. Most children with the condition will achieve the usual developmental milestones, such as sitting, crawling, standing, walking, and talking, but it may take them a few months longer than is the case with typical children. Since learning disability is a key characteristic of Down syndrome, you need to understand what this label means. To have a learning disability is to experience a long-term condition that impacts upon an individual's ability to learn new skills or assimilate new information in a manner that would usually be expected for someone of their age, sex, and background. Although it is primarily associated with children who have trouble learning in the classroom, learning disabilities affect the way in which someone functions in every area of their life. Therefore, it has important implications for the way in which those diagnosed with these conditions live, work, and succeed within the education system. A learning disability is not to be confused with mental illnesses such as depression or specific learning difficulties such as dyslexia, both of which can occur in high-functioning individuals who are otherwise neurologically typical. Learning disabilities are classified into 3 main levels: low, moderate, and severe. If an individual has a low learning disability, they usually reach the same developmental milestones as others, but the process may take longer. Someone with low learning disability is usually capable of taking care of themselves and can manage most day-to-day tasks with a low level of assistance. If a child shows signs of 2 or more disabilities and their learning disability is the most prominent, they will be given the diagnosis of profound and multiple learning disability. In addition to a learning disability, most children in this group will have additional needs, including physical disabilities and ongoing mental health problems. They will often need lifelong support in carrying out everyday activities such as eating and going to the toilet. Most children will receive a single diagnosis, but around 10% will also be diagnosed with other conditions, including an autism spectrum disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. ASD is a term applied to a collection of conditions that exert a significant impact on the way in which an individual behaves, interacts with others in social settings, develops particular interests, and makes use of verbal and nonverbal communication. The symptoms of ASD manifest before the age of 3, although for various reasons a diagnosis may not be made until much later. Some individuals reach adolescency or even adulthood before they are correctly diagnosed. Approximately 1% of the total population has an ASD, with more males than females affected by the condition. From a young age, a person with ASD will show an abnormal communication style. Typically, they will not make use of verbal and nonverbal gestures in the usual manner. For example, they may appear unable to read other people's body language or use the same tone of voice regardless of their mood or the environment in which they find themselves. And now it's time to talk about the causes of Down syndrome. Down syndrome is directly caused by the presence of an extra chromosome. In order to appreciate the link between this abnormality and the signs of the syndrome, a basic understanding of chromosomes and genetics is useful. The human body is made up of many cells, which serve a variety of functions. Almost every type of cell contains genes, which are clustered into chromosomes. Chromosomes resemble trees and serve one main purpose: to inform the genes how to express themselves in such a way that the body is structured and maintained. For example, chromosomes contain genetic information that tells the genes what color a person's eye need to be, what texture their hair will be, and so on. In short, genetic information governs everything from a person's height to their personality. Although the research is still ongoing into the role genetics play in shaping complex phenomena such as intelligence. Normally, every cell contains 46 chromosomes. Half come from a person's father and half come from their mother. However, people with Down syndrome have an unusual genetic profile. Instead of 46 chromosomes in every cell, they have 47. This extra chromosome is a copy of chromosome 21st. Down syndrome is not usually an inherited condition, that is, it is not typically passed on from a parent to their child. Instead, it is a chance occurrence that happens when the chromosomes with an egg or sperm cell change. According to the National Association for Down Syndrome, a British doctor by the name of John Langdon Down first identified the syndrome in 1866. He termed it Mongolism, and people with the condition were sometimes referred to as Mongolian idiots. This xenophobic and offensive terminology was used by medical practitioners at the time because it was claimed that people with Down syndrome resembled people living in Mongolia. The next major leap forward in understanding the syndrome was made in 1959 when Professor Jeremy Lyon established that the symptoms were triggered by an extra copy of chromosome 21st. He was assisted in this discovery by his colleague Mart Gauter. There are still many questions left unanswered concerning the biomechanics of Down syndrome and whether it can be prevented. According to the charity Down Syndrome Research, the prevailing opinion within the medical community has been that it is impossible to devise any form of treatment that prevents or lessens the effect of the extra copy of chromosome 21st because it consists of over 500 genes. Therefore, it seemed impossible to pin down the exact cause of the characteristics associated with Down syndrome to any particular gene. However, in recent years, biomedical research has started to identify precisely how specific genes work to produce the psychological changes seen in Down syndrome. Within the next few decades, we could see the release of the first drugs specially designed to target the expression of specific genes, thereby preventing some of the health problems seen in the Down syndrome.